Most comic book fans know that Amazing Spider-Man is the flagship for Marvel Comics, the biggest book, the most important book that they put out every single month, but you wouldn't know it by the way that Marvel Comics and Zeb Wells and Nick Lowe are treating the book as of late. It's just been a complete mess under Zeb Wells. The beginning stories with Tombstone, perfectly fine. Everything else has been crap. You think, well, it can only get better after Gang War. It can only get better after this or that. And every time Zeb Wells finds a way to subvert my expectations, and there was something that came out on social media this week, and I looked at it and I was like, there's no way that can be true, because that is the stupidest idea, not only in the history of Spider-Man. Well, maybe that's the second stupidest idea, because you do have One More Day, but it does look stupider than anything that came out during One More Day. But this is one of the stupidest ideas in the history of Marvel Comics, period. One of the dumbest ideas ever. Marvel, for some reason, have become a company, instead of being the house of ideas, they go, let's take a concept that would make a provocative or interesting variant cover, and let's actually make that who the character is. And that's basically what's happening with Peter Parker Spider-Man, because he's going to become an abomination at this point. Peter Parker will become a variation of the Green Goblin in Marvel Comics' all-new Easy Being Green arc, which begins in May's Amazing Spider-Man number 50 from writer Zeb Wells and artists Ed McGuinness and Todd Nauck. The publisher recently released Ed McGuinness's cover for July's Amazing Spider-Man 53 with the first appearance of the Spider-Goblin. I am beyond goblined out. I actually didn't think they could come up with a dumber idea than the Gold Goblin, but they truly did outdo themselves. The Spider-Goblin with a Green Goblin themed or Amazing Spider-Man themed Green Goblin character. Oh my goodness. It just looks so stupid. I feel bad. I feel terrible for Ed McGuinness, one of the greatest artists of his generation, one of the best artists still remaining that works regularly at Marvel Comics, does interiors, not all the time, but he actually does interior work, obviously does a lot of covers, and he has to do the Spider-Goblin. Just, they are clearly out of ideas. There's nothing left for them to do with the character. Kill Peter Parker off. Just murder him in some fantastical way, make it meaningful, and move on from the character if you literally cannot do anything more interesting than turning him into the fucking Green Goblin. It's just, it's so frustrating being a Marvel fan. You know, there are series out there that maybe aren't that important, and even as a comic book reviewer, I can just, kind of skip them. Cy Sprague's Flash, I pay it no mind. I don't know what's happened for the last 4 months, because the series is literally so unimportant and so stupid that I just don't pay attention to it. I cannot treat Amazing Spider-Man, I can't treat Batman, I can't even treat Detective Comics like that. And I'm just being inundated with these terrible fucking ideas on all the mainline, frontline, flagship fucking characters at both companies. And it's, my goodness, it's so frustrating. And there's going to be all these stupid YouTubers out there be like, oh, this is spec value. We might see the Spider-Goblin in a cartoon or a movie one day. He's like, who gives a flying fuck? Like, God, you got to stop supporting this stuff. There's no spec value to the Spider-Goblin, because there's no future for the character, because it's not a character. It's a caricature. It's a stupid idea. It's a variant cover gone wrong. It's the fucking garbage pail, kids, in 2024 is exactly what shit like the Spider-Goblin is. And as if you haven't noticed, I'm a little bit frustrated with the situation that they continuously come up with dumber and dumber ideas. How many stupid fucking ideas can Zeb Wells and Nick Lowe come up with together? It feels like they're trying to break a record at this point. Per Marvel, Peter Parker carries the weight of Norman Osborn's sins and takes to the skies as the Spider-Goblin. Queen Goblin imbued a spear with the sins of Norman Osborn, the metaphysical essence of his murderous dark side, and gave it to Kraven, who stabbed Spider-Man with it, infusing him with Osborn's sins and bringing out Peter's dark side. Spider-Man eventually became free of the effects, but with the reappearance of Queen Goblin and the spear in Amazing Spider-Man 47, it remains to be seen if this bears any implication for how Peter will soon become the Spider-Goblin. It's exactly how Peter is going to become the Spider-Goblin. Oh God, when I saw this week and I saw the Goblin Queen Goblin again, and right at that moment I was like, oh, I forgot how goblined out I was. There's so many variations of this stupid character. and I'd actually mind dumped. I'd headcanoned out fucking the stupid spear and all the sins of Norman Osborn and the spear that Craven stabbed Peter Parker with. I was hoping it would never be revisited again. And for some reason, we're going to go out and revisit the dumbest shit that anyone's come up with Spider-Man over the last 5 years. Just terrible ideas. You know, in this week's or last week's, I guess now, Amazing Spider-Man issue fucking looks great. $1 million, Todd Nauck on there, refreshing change from John Romita Jr. It looks so great. And as you read it, you're just like, huh, all this stuff that happened 2 years ago that no one cares about, why are we revisiting it now? Because they're going to break out the Spider-Goblin. The big guns, people. They're really searching. They just want to sell variant covers at this point. And it was a very frustrating read this week. It was frustrating to see Todd Nauck, another fantastic artist at Marvel Comics. They don't have that many, being wasted on such a stupid story. And now to realize that it's only going to get dumber and dumber and dumber as Zeb Wells continues on aimlessly on fucking Amazing Spider-Man and gets pantsed by Jonathan Hickman and Marco Cicchetto and everyone else associated with Ultimate Spider-Man, which is quickly becoming the Spider-Man book of choice. I think that book is going to outsell Amazing Spider-Man for the next 2 or 3 years. There's no way Zeb Wells has any staying power at this point. It's actually, you don't ever see this. Amazing Spider-Man, if you look at the sales rankings that are available from Comics Hub this past month, in March, it was actually outside of the top 5. That never happens to Batman, and it certainly never happens to Amazing Spider-Man. But people are getting fed up with this shit, getting fed up with Zeb Wells' lame-ass, stupid take on Spider-Man that really is nothing that anyone that's ever been a fan of the character ever wanted to see, and it's not even interesting. That's the worst part. It's fucking boring. It's tedious. It's lame. And it's certainly anything in the world but fun to read. It's a fucking chore at this point, and it's only going to get worse as we get up to it ain't easy being green, fellas, because Peter Parker is going to become Norman Osborn. Osborn, the original Green Goblin, changed after the Sin Eater purged Norman's metaphysical dark side. Norman has attempted to make amends by employing Peter Parker at Oscorp and allying himself with Spider-Man as Gold Goblin. Writer Wells has previously teased Osborn's return to villainy as the Green Goblin, with the upcoming Easy Being Green and Amazing Spider-Man 50 potentially being where it happens. Well, I guess we know that it's going to happen, or maybe they're just going to combine. We're going to have Peter Osborn or Norman Parker as the stupid Spider-Goblin. They're going to become one entity or something stupid like that no one ever wanted to read. And they are taking a lot of this stuff with the Sin Eater and then the sins of Norman Osborn being taken away from him, are all coming out of that Nick Spencer Spider-Man run, which was actually good, shockingly good, after all the damage that Nick Spencer did to his reputation with Secret Invasion and all that kind of stuff, you know, Nazi Cap. He comes back, redeems himself on Amazing Spider-Man, and basically he's almost at the finish line. He's about to retcon one more day. Peter Parker's got the frickin' engagement ring in his pocket. He's getting ready to ask Mary Jane the question. Obviously, he gets interrupted, but he was going to get back to it eventually. So Zeb Wells, the fucking genius that he is, along with Nick Spencer, real fucking brain trust there. They go back and they're like, what was it about Nick Spencer's run that people were liking? Oh, I think it was the Sin Eater. I think it was Norman Osborn's sins being taken away from him, going on to Peter Parker. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were going to get the marriage back together and get Peter and MJ back together, and he was about to pop the question again. We're basically going to be able to get back to where Peter Parker and MJ should have been the whole time. No, let's go back and borrow all the shit that nobody cared about. That was all on the peripheral of all the stuff that people were invested in, and the reason that Amazing Spider-Man was a great book. People were loving it, and they were coming back for more and more every single month. Yeah, let's skip all the stuff that people wanted to read and just do more misery porn with Peter Parker. And now he's going to become the Spider-Goblin. One of Marvel's most dangerous couples is finally together again after months of separation by hell itself, with the benefactor having her sights set on restarting an old war against Peter Parker. In the recently released Amazing Spider-Man 47, Ben Reilly and Janine Godby's business with the Queen Goblin has only just begun, talking about the reemergence of Chasm and Hallows Eve. Like I said, within that Amazing Spider-Man 47, there are so many returns that you forgot about that you hoped Zeb Wells and Nick Lowe and everybody associated with Amazing Spider-Man were just going to forget. Oh, it's so bad. There's like this giant guy. He looks like Jason. And I didn't even get it at first. Apparently that was Hallows Eve, and she takes the mask off when she sees Chasm. I thought maybe that was Chasm, and she took the mask off of him. I wasn't even really sure. It's not really apparent, even though the art is very good. The script itself sucks, so it was hard to make it apparent what was happening. Later, she puts on another mask and turns into a wolf. I don't even remember that being part of the character. And Chasm just like shows up and he wants to make out with her. I was like, why do you keep doing this to my boy here? You know, he's the clone of freaking Peter Parker. Ben Reilly deserves more. He looks like Venom. He's basically D-list Venom at this point. They even gave him all of Venom's original like motivations and all that kind of stuff. And he's just Venom light at this point. Why don't you just put Dylan Mulvaney on a fucking commercial for Chasm and Hallows Eve and really think the character is even worse than what Zeb Wells has done? It's just, if you haven't noticed, I'm very frustrated with Amazing Spider-Man. I'm very frustrated with Marvel. I'm very frustrated with Zeb Wells. I'm very frustrated with Nick Lowe. I'm very frustrated with great artists like Ed McGuinness and Todd Nauck being wasted on stories that nobody has an interest in, because perhaps after the issue comes up, people will be selling the stupid first appearance of the Spider-Goblin for $52 on eBay. The problem is nobody will be reading the fucking book because it's literally a story that nobody ever actually wanted to read. And that's how I feel about it. I'm not holding anything back on this one. Just, I'm a little bit pissed off, but that's fine. If you would like more coverage of Amazing Spider-Man and Marvel Comics and DC Comics and all the sins, the entire comic book industry that's pissing me off more and more by the day, you do need to go to the Thinking Critical Patreon, where we do have lots of fun stuff, and I'm probably not going to be quite as frustrated as I am right here, right now. But we'll definitely be talking about this with Doc, with Aaron Sparrow, because this is an idea so spectacularly stupid. I've got to discuss it with everybody because I want to have as many opinions on this and why it's the dumbest idea perhaps in the history of Marvel Comics, period. If you haven't checked out Thinking Critical Patreon, there's a link in the video description.